Okay, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this presentation, Top 5 Frequently Asked Questions on Consumer Proposal and Insolvency. Now, today we have a guest presenter. Just a second, there we are. We've got Joshua Harris. He is a licensed insolvency trustee with Harris and Partners. He has agreed he's going to introduce himself. I'm going to shut off my video here for a little while. And Joshua, you're just going to keep me posted on when you want me to change to the next slide, just like next slide, Richard. And anyway, without further ado, I get to shut up. Joshua, it's over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. It's a great honor to be here and to work with Credit Canada, such an incredible organization, and that my firm has worked with for dozens of years, actually. So it's a great honor to be here. So thank you so much. As Richard said, my name is Joshua Harris. Some of you may know me. I am a licensed insolvency trustee and a partner at Harris and Partners Inc. There's a much younger, better looking version of me in that photo there, in case you recognize me from then. But you're talking to post-COVID Josh now. So anyways, I am one of the partners at Harris and Partners Inc. We are one of the largest insolvency trustee firms in the country. We span across 9 provinces. So that's every province excluding Quebec, and unfortunately not the territories either. I am a third generation trustee. So my grandfather was a licensed insolvency trustee, one of the first in Canada in 1964, and he focused on Toronto. My father then took over the firm in the year 2000 and focused on Southern Ontario. And of course, when the third generation took over the last few years, we have expanded nationally. We take the approach of being extremely open to our clients, available with tons of different ways to contact us, live chat, email, calls, texts, 24 hours a day. And we try to be very friendly and, shed that suit and tie look and just be like a regular person trying to give you a hand and try to explain everything the best we can. So I'm very excited to talk to you about these top 5 facts and to answer any questions you might have. Got plenty of time to answer those questions. So thank you for attending. And Richard, feel free to go to the next slide there. Again, so just our title here, Top 5 Facts on Consumer Proposal and Insolvency, is what we're going to be focusing on today. There are obviously many other FAQs that may come up, and feel free to ask those in the Q&A period, or if you feel more appropriately privately, I'm more than happy to answer your questions at any time. So go ahead there, Richard. Perfect. So the number one question that everybody asks is, how long does this affect my credit? There is a little bit of information written there, but to simplify it as much as possible, there are different portions of a credit report that are affected in different ways. So the first portion that I like to focus on is the score. So generally speaking, when you file a consumer proposal, your score is going to go down between 100 and 150 points, and that does take between 6 to 18 months to actually take full effect. The good news is you can actually rebuild that score while you're in the proposal. And we focus very greatly with our clients because not all trustees are created equal, but our firm makes a big effort to help you rebuild that score during the process to get you access to credit as soon as possible, because we understand with the Netflixes and other subscription services in the world out there today that you do need to have some sort of credit. So your score will get affected, but usually rebuilds very quickly. The second thing is that there is a section of your report that actually lists the proposal filing itself, or bankruptcy filing. And the listing of the proposal will remain in that section until the sooner of 3 years from the time you complete your payments, or 6 years from the day you file, whatever comes first. So paying it off faster does have a reward of falling off that credit report sooner, but it is not mandatory because the maximum length is 6 years. For a bankruptcy, it's a little bit different. So if it's your first bankruptcy, it would stay in that section for 6 years after your discharge. Discharge length is dependent on your income and assets. But if it's your second or third or fourth or any more bankruptcies, it will stay on there for 14 years after your discharge. Just to reiterate, that effect does not apply to proposals. If you were to file 2, 3, 4, 5 proposals, it doesn't affect the length of time that it remains there. The last thing that people often look at is their trade creditors. So trade creditors on a credit report are the list of the people you've borrowed money from, and it shows your payment status. So in a consumer proposal, those statuses should change to an R9 while you're in the proposal and then go to an R7 when you've completed the proposal successfully. While as a bankruptcy remains as an R9 for the entire duration of it being on your credit report. Those terms R9, R7, there's also I7 and things like that, a little bit more convoluted and more dependent on the particular creditor. But the real effect and the ability to obtain credits in the future is ultimately in that report section where it shows whether you've been in an insolvency or not and that score. So we've got that 3 to 6 year period for a proposal and 6 to 14 year period for a bankruptcy. And of course, we are working very closely with our debtors to ensure that they are rebuilding that score and leaving this program better off than they started, because ultimately that is the goal. Thank you. Yeah, Richard, could you, thank you so much. So what is the difference between a consumer proposal and a bankruptcy? Probably, if not more common than the credit report question, certainly up there with it. And there are several differences. It's hard to sort of capture that in a 2 to 5 minute talk, but we'll start with the very simple stuff. So a consumer proposal is basically a 5-year plan that you make an offer to your creditors, of which they will have 45 days to vote on the acceptance of that offer, where every dollar you owe counts as one vote. And we need the majority of those votes to be yes at the end of 45 days in order to be accepted. Once it is accepted, you have that 5-year period to pay it off and do your 2 counseling sessions. Failure to make payments to that means that you'll go back to owing the creditors the money, obviously minus whatever you've paid. There's no interest, there's no hidden fees, there's no court, and nothing complicated. Once it's approved, and it's as long as you make your payments and attend those creditor sessions or counseling sessions, it will stay valid. And the reason that's very important is because, in contrast, a bankruptcy is an income monitoring process. So throughout your bankruptcy, we are monitoring your income on a monthly basis. Now, of course, if you're on a pension or a fixed income, your income is going to be the same, and we can quote you right out the outset, and we'll know basically what your bankruptcy is going to cost and the length of time. However, if you work in certain industries like construction or seasonal work or something like that, and your income changes quite often, then the length of time of a bankruptcy and the cost of bankruptcy will fluctuate throughout the process. Additionally, failure to make your payments or failure to comply with the consumer proposal means that you will end up in court for a court opposition. And there's a fee for that, and the judge usually makes you pay more money. So it's not an ideal situation. You don't just exit bankruptcy and go back to owing money. The other thing, other than the credit report, which of course we already spoke about on the previous slide, is taxes. So in a consumer proposal, you still file your own taxes. You get all of your benefits, all of your refunds as usual. There is some offset for the any prior refunds, and we can go into that in the Q&A if someone's curious. But we explain that in detail to all of our debtors. While as in a bankruptcy, the trustee is actually responsible and liable to file your taxes for you during the year of insolvency, which would mean that you wouldn't get any refunds, and most of your benefits are seized by the trustee for the benefit of your creditors. The last and most important difference, I think, is how assets are handled. Basically what that section is that in a consumer proposal, your assets remain your assets. They may be considered when you are calculating your proposal benefit. However, in a bankruptcy, your assets are actually turned over to the trustee. And even though you can buy them back from the trustee is in control of your house or your car or your RESP or something like that. So some major differences, but I think the key takeaway is that the consumer proposal is more of an offer. It's more driven by something that you will make an offer for, and then it is set in stone as long as you make your agreed payments. While a bankruptcy is more of a court-driven process, and we're constantly monitoring your income, and it has a much harder effect on your ability to obtain credit in the future. I know I speak very fast, so don't hesitate to ask Q&A questions at the end if I glossed over anything. Richard, go ahead there. Oh, I went over this a little bit previously. So what happens to my assets? So in a consumer proposal, like I mentioned, a stay of proceedings is in place, and all of your assets are fully protected by you or by the process from any of your creditors. So nobody, the trustee is not coming and selling your house. The trustee is not taking your car. The trustee is not cashing in your RESP if you're in a non-exempt province. An RRSP contributions in the last 12 months. Everything is completely safe and is yours and your responsibility to continue handling TFSA, anything like that. Like I mentioned in the previous slide, a bankruptcy is different in that your assets actually vest in the trustee. So technically, the trustee becomes responsible for those assets, and the responsibility of the trustee is to realize on those assets. So what that means is that the trustee needs to work to their best ability to maximize the amount of money that is recovered from those assets for your creditors. So that may mean cashing in an RESP, maybe cashing in a TFSA. It might mean selling a home or something like that. There are other options if you end up in a bankruptcy scenario. For example, you can buy back the equity from your house from the trustee, and that agreement can be made at the beginning. It can be made throughout. And certainly we do advise, bringing to the attention of any trustee the assets that you have at the outset, because we want to protect them as much as possible for you. The goal of a trustee is not to take things away from you, but to give you a fresh start. So if we're able to come to an amicable agreement at the outset on a buyback of some equity in a home, then that is set and you just have to make that payment. However, if we don't come to an agreement and you end up in bankruptcy for 3 years and house values have inflated, well, then all of a sudden there's more equity and a bigger discussion needs to be had. So important to be very transparent with your trustee and discuss your options at the outset. In the last paragraph here, I do mention that there are some exemptions for certain property types throughout Canada, and those are set by the province. An easy example I've given here is that in Ontario, equity up to 7,700 of a vehicle is exempt. So equity is the total value minus the loan would be the equity. So if you have a vehicle financed for $50,000 and the vehicle is worth $40,000, or sorry, if the vehicle is worth 50 and you owe 40, your equity is 10,000. So in that case, you would have a certain amount, 2,700, that's not exempt, and you would have to consider buying that back from the trustee. Now, if it's the reverse and you're in a negative equity situation, there are options for there as well, where you could return a vehicle and write off the negative equity. And of course, I'm open to discussing that in further detail if someone wants to discuss privately or in the Q&A. Yeah. Okay, Richard, next one there for me. Richard? Did we lose Richard?
No, I actually advanced it to we're on how do I
sorry.
rebuild? Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
They all look the same. Okay, so how do I rebuild my credit while I'm in a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy? Now, this one is very interesting because not all trustees are created equal in this sense. All trustees have access to the same laws under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act of Canada. That's the consumer proposal, the bankruptcy, and different types of bankruptcies and proposals that are available to people. But what all trustees don't have, just like doctors, is the same kind of bedside manner, for lack of a better way to say it. So what we do at Harrison Partners is we focus on building up your credit so that when you exit a proposal, you're in a better situation than you started with. Now, every consumer proposal or bankruptcy does have 2 mandatory financial counseling sessions. Those sessions, which take place sometime in the first 60 days, the first one, and then sometime before the end of the proceeding for the second one, can be very simple. It can be a 5-minute conversation, sign here, done. But we don't do that. We have a team of 12 counselors that help people across the country, and we've built out an entire package on how to rebuild your credit. Some of the easy ways to do that are to get a secured credit card, which will report to your credit report, and use it so that it does report to your credit report. Make sure you pay it off in full, of course. Other things are like paying your phone bill on time, because Rogers and Bell and TELUS all report to the credit bureau. So same with vehicles. I mean, you want to do things that are reporting to your credit bureau. So our focus is on helping you get those things that will report to your bureau. So that's getting that secured credit card for you. That's getting, helping you get a vehicle if you need to, helping you get a mortgage refinancing if you need to. And we have built out a specialized group of partners that we trust that aren't going to upcharge you on warranties and on monthly fees and all this and that to make sure that you are rebuilding your credit. And we're going to guide you and hold your hand literally through that process so that you will get better credit by the end. Additionally, we will review your credit report with you. We do pull credit reports. Unfortunately, we don't get scores directly, but if you were to send that to us, we'd be more than happy to review that with you. And we focus on ensuring that we have a relationship with you so we understand exactly where you are at throughout this process and ensuring that when you exit this process, you have better credit than when you started with a clean credit report and no predatory lenders on it. Okay, so last one of the five there, Richard, if you could go ahead. This is a great question that comes up all the time. Is my spouse liable for my debts? So the simple answer is no. Your spouse is not liable for your debts. However, if your spouse, or for that matter, any other person has co-signed or guaranteed your debt, then they do become liable. And what that means is that both people who owe the money are liable for the full amount of the debt until it is paid in full. Now, this can sometimes be a little bit complicated, so I do want to explain it. But let's take, for example, a person who has 20,000 of debt, of which 10,000 of that debt is co-signed by their spouse, and they file a consumer proposal in which they offer $10,000 back to their creditors. So their intention is to cut their debt by 50%. Okay. Now, keeping things very simple and global, what that means is that their joint debt, which was 10,000, is only going to get 5,000 from the proposal. But that doesn't mean that the creditor is going to get $5,000 on the day the proposal is approved. The proposal monies are collected in trust by the trustee, i.e., licensed insolvency trustee, and we distribute that money out on an annual basis. Some firms may do it monthly or quarterly or only every 5 years, but we do it monthly at Harrison Partners. And every time we make a payment from the trust funds to the creditors, the amount of money that is owed by the cosigner decreases. Another important thing is that the cosigner, if they are not in a proposal or a bankruptcy, they will be incurring interest as the proposal is going on for the person that's in the proposal. So it's very important to know if you've co-signed or guaranteed a debt, or if someone has co-signed or guaranteed your debt prior to entering into an insolvency, to know what that repercussion is for that person and how you can manage that situation for that person. But ultimately, the short answer to the question is, if they haven't guaranteed or co-signed, they are not liable. Just to take that one step further, if a family member of yours were to pass away, you do not become liable for their debt. You cannot inherit someone's debt. There are some laws about being an executor to a will and things like that. And I certainly recommend that you seek the proper legal advice where necessary in that scenario. But the reality is you do not inherit debt. And lastly, something that does come up with this spouse thing is my trustee going to share this information with my spouse, or for that matter, my employer or anybody? And the reality is no. Although the documents are considered public domain and someone could do an insolvency search on your name, which costs $8, we do not send the information out to anyone. We don't publish it anywhere. It's not on our website. And we can only give information out to stakeholders in the estate. So it's not something that comes up often, and we're certainly not going to be the ones that are telling your spouse. But that said, we do operate under the honesty is the best policy. And we do recommend that people are open about these things because they're often surprised at how supportive their spouse will be, and how they may be able to come up with other solutions, because insolvency isn't necessarily the best option for everyone. But we're here to go through that with you as part of our free consultation and answer any questions that a spouse may have or another family member as well. Excellent. Thank you, Richard. You can move forward. Perfect.
And I'll just get my camera turned back on again. And anyway, so there we got both of us again. So while we're waiting to see if anybody out there does have any questions, I had actually a bit of a question stroke comment about what you'd mentioned about the drop in credit score when somebody enters a consumer proposal. I think I maybe just want to just make sure you clarify that, as that would be like a typical situation. And I'll use an extreme example. I encountered a person some time ago who was not in a proposal or a bankruptcy yet, But somehow through, I mean, you can just imagine what it would have taken to do this. They had driven their credit score down into the lower 400s. So,
Right.
okay, so you can imagine. So that person was wondering, well, what would doing a bankruptcy, what would that do to my credit score? And I said, very, very little of anything, because there's a point at which there's no further down to go. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
I would imagine if when you've seen people who have credit scores that low, they're basically the credit score effect is just negligible for them, you know.
Yeah, and that's why we give such a wide range. I know people don't like that answer, that 50 to 150, but it's because, someone comes in with a 900 credit score,
Yeah,
they're going to get that 150 hit. And,
yeah,
and just to sort of reiterate, one thing that often comes up is, someone will come in here and they'll have, um, a couple predatory lenders. I don't want to say names, but those loans where they're like 40% interest and things like that. And they maybe owe 20,000 on something like that. And they're like, yeah, but my credit score is a 750. So I don't want to do a proposal because my credit score is so great. Well, the problem with that is when you go to get a mortgage or a car loan and they pull your credit and they see those predatory lenders, they don't care about your score. They care about what's on your report. You're never going to pay back a loan that's got a 45% interest rate. It's impossible.
yeah.
Like it's designed to be impossible. And I mean, I'm part of the association for trustees, and we are always advocating to have those things be made more and more illegal. I mean, it's wild out there, the types of loans that people get.
Yeah. True enough. Yeah. So I'm just taking a look to see if we have anything there in the chat or the Q&A. And I don't see anything there yet. We will give people maybe another minute just in case anybody is out there quickly typing. Try to get something in there. If you do have a question, then again, if you are looking for if you got things you want to have answered, but perhaps you don't want to do this in a public forum. Well, we've had Joshua Harris's, obviously the website is there, the phone number is there. And I'm pretty sure that if you go to the website, you'd be able to find Joshua's direct contact information. So if you're out there and you're thinking, or perhaps if you're watching this later on as a recording, and you're thinking, actually, I do want to speak with a licensed insolvency trustee, I'm sure that Joshua will be more than happy to hear from you. So anyway, we do have one thing that has come up in the chat. Um, and this is a question. Okay, actually, this is kind of relevant here. Somebody is wondering about applying for a rental, like, looking for a new apartment with a low credit score due to a consumer proposal. Any advice in that area?
Yes. So I just wanted to say, Richard, it looks like someone also asked, an anonymous person asked something in the Q&A section as well. So we can get to
Aha.
that one after.
Okay.
For the low credit score, applying for an apartment. So yes, that challenge does come up quite often. A trustee should be able to provide you a status letter and a statement of affairs, which shows that it is a consumer proposal, that you've been making your payments on time, and that you've eliminated a lot of your debt. Um, Even in that scenario, it is unfortunate that some of the bigger landlords, especially foreign-owned landlords, will not understand what that means in comparison to a bankruptcy. Um, I know I can say, at least for my firm, we'll prepare that status letter for you within 24 hours, usually much shorter. And we're also more than happy to speak to your potential landlord. But the best advice I can give is to try to find an individual landlord, even if they own an apartment building or something like that, but like an actual human. Corporations can sometimes be a little bit soulless, for lack of a better word, and they just don't. It's black and white for them. So trying to speak to a human being and actually getting the information out to them that you are in fact in a proposal, that you are paying back your creditors, and that this is a good thing, not a bad thing, and getting that information from your trustee to try to get that solved. And in most cases, I would say all cases I've been involved in, we've been able to make sure that they find something suitable for themselves.
Okay, thank you. And as you mentioned, there is an anonymous question that came in through the Q&A. So the person who's asking the question says they're in a proposal and their 5-year mark is March 2025. They still see the account on the credit report saying it's open. Any comment on that as to what could be going on there?
Absolutely. So first of all, congratulations on getting you're getting close to the end of your proposals, and that's awesome. I hope everything went well for you, and whichever trustee you worked with, I hope they've been there for you as well to answer your questions. Um, So the credit report is a totally living being. And I say that in that they get their information constantly from different sources and update things based on the information they get. So when you do file a proposal or a bankruptcy, we notify, as a trustee, we notify the superintendent of bankruptcy, the government, and the government notifies the government notifies the credit bureau, and they update their record to add it into that insolvency section that I had mentioned. However, for the trade creditors, the creditors themselves actually update the report. Now, usually we like to say that within 6 months, which unfortunately is a long time, they start reporting that the debt has been settled through the proposal. There are certain creditors, specifically two that I can think of off the top of my head, and I will call them out here. Canadian Tire and Walmart seem to continue to post, or sorry, Canadian Tire and Capital One continue to say that you're missing payments during the entire 5 year period of your proposal. And then as soon as the 5 years is over, they write written off in the proposal. And we have brought this up to CAREP, the Association of Insolvency Restructuring Professionals. We've brought this up to the Superintendent of Bankruptcy. I've brought it up with Canadian Tire and Capital One themselves. And basically what they say is they feel that what they're doing is not wrong, is not wrong. And they also say that if you want to get it changed, you have to dispute it with the credit bureau directly. So if you are a client of Harrison Partners or you're a potential client of Harrison Partners, what we recommend is reaching out to us, and we will give you thorough instructions on how to make that dispute with the credit bureau to get it updated. We've had a lot of success with that. Now, I'm sure the follow-up question is, hey, why can't the trustee deal with it? The reality is that the credit report is actually yours. It's not something that we deal with. It's not something we're allowed to legally deal with. We are not your representative in that sense. So if we try to reach out to Equifax or TransUnion, they're going to reject us. But we do have very thorough instructions with the correct documentation. And for you, it's literally click, click, email, done, and you should be able to get that resolved right away.
The person who asked the anonymous question, it appears as though they had mentioned in the chat as well, the chat that came to us, that it was, you mentioned Capital One. You said you called out Capital One, and they said, yeah, it's Capital One and student loan. I'm assuming something from National Student Loan Service Center, something like that.
Student loans, we should be able to get cleaned up. So it could just be an error. The Capital One, like I said, I highly recommend disputing it. Student loan, you can also dispute if you're already just submitting a dispute. But generally, my experience with student loans is that they are amicable. Different provinces are a little bit different. So, for example, in Alberta, the Alberta Student Loans Department may report missed payments while you're in the proposal, whereas national student loans won't. So it does depend on your province, but we've had extremely good success with the disputing process, and I highly recommend you do so. Even if you, I like that question. That means that you are not my client. Unfortunately, when you are in a consumer proposal, you cannot change trustees without a court order, and I don't recommend it. However, I'm more than happy to assist you if you were to email me directly, giving you the instructions to the best of my ability to help you get that dispute going. And also, I can pull your documents from the government, or you can send them to me. And I can review them for you at no charge anytime. I think we talked about it before, but my email address is just joshua@harrispartners.ca, and I try to be extremely responsive.
We have one more there in the chat, and that is the question about tax debt. What happens to tax debt that's owed to the CRA in consumer proposals and bankruptcies?
Great question. So the simple answer is that tax debt, and I'm assuming in this case you're talking about personal income tax, will get written off, meaning it gets included in the consumer proposal or bankruptcy. When we're talking about consumer proposals, we're going to split that into a prorated period. So if you were to file a consumer proposal today, so that's June 26, 2024, when you go to file your 2024 income taxes in April of 2025, you're going to want to split your year up. Now, the way you actually do that is you file a full return, and then your trustee, or in any case, we would be happy to provide it to you, would give you the phone number of the CRA insolvency hotline, to which you would call and say, I would like to prorate my year for 2024 based on my insolvency date of June 26th. And basically what that does is it splits the year. That works for both owing and getting a refund. So if you were intending to get a refund for 2024, but you owed for 2023, the CRA has a legal right of set off, meaning they can come and take your refund for 2024 to pay off the 2023 amount. But because you filed mid year, they can only take half your refund for this year. So you would call and get it prorated. If you owe new money for 2024, you can get that amount cut in half because we're basically exactly at half the year right now. So it's important to keep an eye out for that. And like I said, earlier, not all trustees are created equal. We provide videos and lots of newsletters in tax season. We have a tax specialist, and we are just constantly pumping out that information to make sure everybody knows about that proration because it can really make all the difference when you go to file your taxes.
Okay, I know we've run a little bit past the half-hour mark here, and I think we've gotten everything taken care of that was out there. So let me just move over to our final slide there, and we're going to wrap things up. I'm just going to remind everyone again that there is a recording of the session. It'll be available online on the Credit Canada website, probably within a day or so. And anyway, you will be getting an email that will have a link for you to view that if you choose to do so. Also, once I close out the presentation, there is a short survey that comes up. If you have the time and you are willing to provide feedback, we appreciate feedback. And finally, once again, I got to say a big thank you to Joshua Harris of Harris and Partners. He's been our guest presenter for today. He's provided a lot of information. I can imagine there's going to be some of you out there that are going to want to watch this again to go over and make sure that you caught everything there. So really a big thank you to you for joining us. And thank you to everybody who attended the webinar today. I hope you all got something useful out of it, and I hope you all come back for a future presentation. So give me a second here. We're just going to wrap things up with first off the
Thanks
stop
for
the
having me.
recording.